I will read you one more to finish, and it might be nice to have some questions, I think. I know possibly in these talks you don't usually do that, but it might be nice to do that. Right. In recent years in Britain, there has been, how can I put it nicely, great changes in education. And these have concerned many of us. And basically, the revolution in education that has taken place over the last 10 years has involved replacing the humanistic curriculum with something altogether different. And this basically took most people like you completely unawares, that nobody quite thought that it could happen overnight, and that the work of the previous 30, 40, 50 years was just swept aside in just one move. There was no argument, no debate. All the previous 30 or 40 years, people had thought that what you do is you argue a position, and you argue, say, this kind of thing could go on in the curriculum, and that kind of thing could go on, and there was an open debate. And no one realised quite that all it needs is for a politician to say, well, actually, we won't talk to any of those people. And so they were just shunted off the desk, and they said, no, we'll just do this. But nobody could quite put their finger on what this was, or at least the philosophy of what this was. And now it is emerging. It was essentially the business model. But what was going on was that every child and every teacher was seen as part of a business production. The child is seen as the raw material, the teacher as the worker on the production line, and that everything could be measured. The teacher's input, the child's output, and the smaller the unit of production, then the more efficiently it could be measured. So you could say, what are you planning to do in the next hour? And then the teacher would say, that was the input. Then the child would do the thing, and at the end of the hour the child would be asked, did you get it? The child would say yes or no, as the case may be, and then there was a tick made. And it was then, within that business model, it was realised that, of course, there's only certain things that fit the business model, and primarily that's around what they think are called facts. So that what you do is you teach facts. So you don't teach process, so you only deal with facts. So if you take fiction or poetry, this then sends a little problem, because the only thing you can be interested in are the facts. But fiction and poetry don't seem to be about facts. It doesn't seem to be what they are. My daughter came home with a worksheet. The worksheet was called Perseus and the Gorgons. The next line said, here is part of a myth from ancient Greece. And I thought, what's the matter with the whole myth? When did they go out of fashion? The first line is, at last Perseus found the Gorgons. Who's Perseus? Who's the Gorgons? Who's telling this story? And then it goes on, and then you turn over the page, and they're the questions. So the first question is, what has Perseus got on his heels? On his sandals? So boring, I couldn't even remember the question right. And then it says, who gave Perseus his shield? And then you had to look back, and it said Athena, and that's why it was there, so that you could answer the question on the other side. And so on. And I thought, where's this stuff coming from? What is it? And it, there is a name for it. It's pseudo empiricism. It's this thing that you think that you can describe the world as a series of facts without ever revealing what joins one supposed fact to another fact. So there's no theory, there's no ideology, all there is just facts. Logical positivism is the other swear word for it. And we scratched our heads, and of course we know that somebody took the mickey out of it years ago. His name was Charles Dickens, in Hard Times. And all you've got to look is the chapter called Never Wonder. And Gradgrind is going, facts, facts, we've got to have the facts, you must have the facts, everything's facts. And one of the kids says, I wonder, and he says, never wonder. And I thought, that's what it is. It is Dickens. So 40-something, when Hard Times came out, he knew the battle was on to defend the right of children and story, and in a kind of Germanic sense, that word poesy, poetry, in the way it used to be meant, covering all these figurative linguistic arts. He knew that there were truths that were there, or the way I think of it is there's a marriage between ideas and feeling attached to recognisable beings, human beings, animals, objects, it doesn't matter, recognisable beings that we care about. That's what this stuff's about. And that we engage with these ideas and feelings at the same time. There is a continuum between ideas and feelings. But this other stuff about what Perseus got on his sandals has got nothing to do with feelings. They're not interested. They're not interested in that. And yet, the dozos think that that's education. So I was so enraged by this worksheet, and I tried not to do what my dad did, which was rage. He would go bananas when this stuff used to come home, and I thought, no, I'll try not to be like my dad. I'll just kind of go out up the garden and kick something, and then come back in again and go, all right, let's do the worksheet together, yeah. But then I thought, no, what else did my parents do? They read to me. Yeah, that's what they did. They read to me, both of them. And my mum, I was just saying over supper this evening, one of the people that I learnt to love when I was a kid was your author, Ernest Thompson Seton. My mother used to go to libraries and discover books that no one else had ever heard of. No one had ever heard of Ernest Thompson Seton in Britain. And there was my mum reading me Raggy Lugs. And I remember thinking, yeah, that's what Mum did. And my dad read us the whole of Great Expectations in a tent at night when we were 12, doing all the voices. And I thought, right, I'll get a book of Greek myths and see if Elsie wants to listen to these, you see. So I started reading Night by Night. It's the Geraldine McCaughrean version. She was 7, and I thought, yeah, it's beautifully told, very, very simple. Oh, Echo and Narcissus, lovely. And we were doing Persephone and the pomegranate seeds. And when Persephone puts the pomegranate seeds in her mouth, she went, oh no, I didn't want her to do that. And it went on a little bit further, and then it got to the bit where one of the gods takes pity on Persephone. And she says, what's pity? So we talked about what the god might be feeling for Persephone, and then we talked about how maybe she might have felt pity when her younger brother cut himself, and we were talking about pity. And then I thought about this in a moment, I kept thinking about it, and then it occurred to me what's gone on here. The story relates stuff that is concrete enough for you to think that there are real pomegranate seeds and there is a person. It doesn't matter how distant and incredible it is, and it's in this cosmogony that comes from 3,000 years ago, and gods, and she doesn't believe in gods, and I don't believe in gods, but we believe in it in the story, and she cares. She goes, oh no, she cares about Persephone. You know, who's Persephone? We don't know. So, you know, but she cares about it. And then there's this word pity, and so it goes from the concrete of this story, where there was enough psychic reality, as Freud puts it, in it for her to care. And then we relate it to her concrete situation of her and her younger brother. But what have we done? We've got this abstract word, pity. A word that is almost meaningless in a way. If you just suddenly lob pity into a room full of kids, you know, age 7 or 8, and go, today we're going to talk about pity. You know, well, you'll lose 95% of them just as you probably got to the word, but then, you know, then you lose another 3% when you get to pity, and then you've just got the 1 or 2 had already come across pity. You're going, oh, right, good, we're doing pity today. Right, like you've lost the rest. But here, embodied in a story, dressed or embedded, whatever words you want to use, we're talking about pity. We've moved from the concrete to the abstract to caring to something very abstract where in a way you're not caring, you're talking about its essence and its nature and the reverberations and connotations that spread out from the word. We've gone all the way along that line and back again. And these people who devised these syllabuses, who've invented this business model, dominated by this logical positivism, they haven't twigged this. Or maybe even worse, maybe they have twigged it, and they're saying, but we're not going to do it anyway. And one thing that makes me think they have twigged it are the stats that get thrown at them. There's an acronym, and someone will remember what it stands for, PIRLS, PEARLS. It's an international literacy comparison-y thingy. And they look at literacy levels all around the world and all the rest of it. But one of the things they also look at is percentages of children who appear to read for pleasure. And they've noticed there's a correlation, all right? I always remember Stephen Jay Gould, correlation is not the same as cause, but even so. They've discovered a correlation between kids who read for pleasure and, however we're going to measure it, school achievement. They've noticed. Now, if they're right, and anecdotally, all of you who've worked with kids and stories and worked with kids across a whole year and 2 years and seen that those kids who are having real trouble have suddenly fastened on to that story, that poem, that picture book, and how they seemed to make leaps and bounds when they were in that play, and I did the rest of it. We've got that anecdotal evidence. We may or may not take that statistical evidence, but if we do, and then we say, well, how come then? How come? If you do poetry in the broadest sense of the word now, in that Germanic sense of poetry, the figurative literary arts, if you do poetry, how can that be that if kids are just sitting around reading for pleasure, just loafing about, as my dad used to say in his own puritanical Jewish communist way, if kids are just loafing about reading books all the time, how can it take them from A to B on that academic ladder? And then I thought back to that conversation about pity, because that's what it does. It keeps taking you from the concrete to the abstract, the concrete to the abstract. If you sit and talk to 8, 9, 10, 11 and 12-year-olds, that one of the things you find is there are some kids in that room who can handle abstractions and some who can't. They're not better or worse, but you find it. You hear it in the way they start talking. And as you go a bit older, 13, 14 and 15-year-olds, you can hear how some kids never quite got hold of it. And the school curriculum is chucking these abstractions at them, for better or for worse. I'm not saying education is all the better for it. That's an argument for another day. But that's what it does. It chucks abstractions at them. In geography, in history, in maths, it's throwing calculus at them. It's throwing, architecture. It doesn't matter. It's throwing abstractions at them. And some kids never get it. And some kids do. And I just found myself thinking, that conversation with Elsie that night about Persephone and the pomegranate seeds and pity, and if you think that might happen with kids who read widely and often and for pleasure, again and again and again and again, as they start making comparisons and contrasts between what they're reading, and they say, oh, that bit's like that bit, and he felt that for her, but then she felt that for him in that other book, and it wasn't quite the same, but it was nearly the same, and was that love or that wasn't love, and all that stuff that goes on in that whole world of books and poetry and so on. And I thought, wow, that actually is something that we should be fighting for. And as I say, the depressing thing is, I think that some of them know this, but they don't want to give it to them. They don't want to give it to everybody. They see it going on in the fancy-pantsy liberal arts colleges, they see it going on in the private schools, and they go, terrific, what a beautiful play, you did all that great, and that great poetry as to it. And then they go into that inner city school, and the kids are all lining up doing their worksheets, and they go, great, terrific, that's what they should be doing. I'm not in much doubt that they know that that's going on, and that our task related to all this stuff is that that's what we have to fight about. And one thing, this is where I wanted to finish, was that it sends me back to the kind of education I had. I had an education in the 50s, and in England we used to have something called the 11 plus exam. The 11 plus, they told them which of us had heads and which of us had hands. That was the nice way that they told us. So they said, all of you, and they always used to point us out, you've got heads. And all of you have got hands. Now, there's nothing, it's not one better than the other. But you're different. And so you're in the heads class and you're in the hands class. But only half of the heads class is going to go to the special school for kids with heads called the grammar school. Half of this class is going to go to the school that isn't. That's called the secondary modern school, and all of you. Anyway, that's what they used to do. So here we go. So I'm sent back to this moment. Miss Williams said that from now on we would have homework, and that we were to bring a homework exercise book to school. This was serious stuff, all about passing the exam called the 11 plus. Everyone was worried about the 11 plus. Would I pass? Would I fail? Everyone was worried. Teachers, parents, us. I couldn't get to sleep. Mum brought me hot milk. On Mondays, Miss Williams went through the homework in our homework books. While she was talking, I got bored. I drew a picture in my homework book of a man with a big beard right in the middle of my maths homework. He was carrying a bag. He put things he picked up off the pavement into his bag. I called him Trev the Tramp. Miss Williams went on going through the homework with the whole class. This was really important. We had to listen or we wouldn't pass the 11 plus. Everyone was listening, everyone was concentrating so that they could pass the 11 plus. I bent down behind the boy sitting in front of me. I looked across at my friend Haribo and held up my picture of Trev the Tramp. I pointed at Trev the Tramp. I whispered, "Trev the Tramp." Miss Williams saw me holding up the homework book. She was onto it in a flash. "What's that, boy? What is it?" I quickly shut the homework book. "Nothing, Miss Williams." She rushed over. She was brilliant at rushing over. She grabbed the homework book. She flicked through the pages. She found the picture of Trev the Tramp right there in the middle of 23 times 12. "This is it, isn't it?" she said. "In your homework book. I'll tell you what's going to happen now, boy," she said. "You're going to take your homework book home to your parents, along with a letter from me." And she pointed at herself when she said, "me." "My goodness, you're in trouble, boy. Serious trouble." For the rest of the day, I was very quiet. I put my feet down on the ground carefully, and I made sure I didn't bump into anything. At going home time, she handed me a big white envelope. "The letter to your parents is in there, along with the homework book." But when I got home, I couldn't face giving it to my mum. I couldn't face giving it to my dad. I nipped upstairs and slipped it under my bed. All evening I was thinking about the big white envelope with the letter from Miss Williams, the homework book, and the picture of Trev the Tramp. I didn't want to give it to them. I didn't want to see their faces as they read the letter and looked at Trev the Tramp. What I did was put the big white envelope on their bed when I went to bed. In the morning, my dad said, "Oh dear, you poor old thing. You must have been so worried about that letter, eh? I'll write one back. I'll say some things in the letter that will make sure you won't have to worry about this stuff anymore, and I'll get you a new homework book." At school, my friend said, "Did you get in trouble? Did you get the wax? What happened?" And I said, "My dad said I wasn't to worry." They didn't believe me. And I don't know what my dad wrote. But Miss Williams never said anything about it ever again. The head never said anything about it again. My dad was a teacher. And maybe he wrote in some kind of special teacher language that meant Miss Williams wouldn't ever say anything again. Some kind of teacher code. That's what must have done it. So, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. I'll just finish by saying that quite often I hear this word privileged and advantaged and disadvantaged and a lot of words like that around education and so on. And when I think about my parents, they both come from unbelievably poverty-stricken backgrounds. I know there's a rumour that Jews are never poverty-stricken, but as it happens, they came from unbelievably poverty-stricken backgrounds. And they came from this strange, if you like, sect that, of course, in the 50s was very much a kind of sect outside. And yet there was something about my upbringing that was incredibly privileged. And it was something to do with words and language and curiosity and meditation and jokes and songs and stories all wrapped up in one. And so if I could just finish by paying a tribute to those late educators, Connie and Harold Rosen. Thanks ever so much. Sorry, thank you. She's good, Rosie. She's very good. She's very good. She said, "Did you want to take questions?" Yes, I said questions and I'd forgotten questions already. Yes, sir.
Yes. How were your personal attitudes and upbringing affected by the print shocks of October 1956? Your parents left for party after Hungary, perhaps influenced by printed party congress as well. The second shock was, of course, the total humiliation of Great Britain and France to at Suez. resignation of Eden. You remember the resignation of Churchill, of course. You may not remember Stately's administration. But this definitely affected you. So how did it affect you?
Right. I'll just fill you in a couple of things there. I'm standing in Trafalgar Square. It's 1956. The Suez invasion has happened, and there's a group of commies standing about round the fountain. I often go to this fountain in order to remember this moment. So this group of commies are standing around. Okay, these my dearly beloved parents and their comrade friends. And coming from the podium is the sound of Nye Bevan, the Labour minister, who is attacking the British and French and Israeli adventure of Suez, and he's speaking, and I can hear him speak.